Clement now. Clement, do you want to just say hi?
Hi, hello, it's me, Clement.
Yeah, so I've got Clement with me. We'll be co-hosting together. We both belong to Muna. We're both registered nurses in different capacities. And yeah, our job is just to carry you guys along. Just a few housekeeping rules to let you know. For starters, can we please keep our mics muted? And to let everybody know, we are recording this session. So I am aware that some people are quite sensitive to not want to be on camera. So do feel free to turn your cameras off and on as you wish. We are going to have all our speakers speak in the Q&A at the end, just so that we can get through the program. But one of our first speakers will have to leave a little bit early, our Ethel Changa, and we will do a small Q&A with her before she goes, and we'll carry questions that we can pass across onto her afterwards. If anything, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat box. If you don't want people to know you're asking that question, you can send a message directly to me, either to Clement, and we'll pick those up as we go along. Feel free to write comments in, and as a welcome, please just type very quickly your name, where you're coming from. So if you're here in Derby like me, hello, I'm Salah, I'm in Derby. If you're in Malawi, I know I've got people coming in from Trinidad, I've got people coming in from the US, so that we can know where you're coming in from and we can welcome you appropriately. Yes, Clement, do you want to say something?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. I think it's good evening. I don't know whether those from Trinidad and Tobago, what time is there? But it's good evening, everyone. As Sarah has already said, my name is Clement now. I am a registered community specialist nurse, and I work here in England, based in Cambridge, for NHS. I'm one of the executive members for Muna. Muna is an organization of Malawian nurses who are based here in the UK. It was started last year in June, and we are registered charity organizations at the moment. Our launch is coming up this year in June. It will be either, I think it is going to be in Birmingham. So Muna organized this webinar for mental health and well-being, because we know during the COVID pandemic since last year, most of us who have lost maybe our relatives, our colleagues, our loved ones, and even some of us who have lost some financial sources, which like jobs. So this, so for that reason, Muna decided to organize this webinar to discuss and learn the impact of COVID after 1 year on mental well-being. So we have got a lineup of guest speakers, and I will let Sarah introduce us the first guest speaker. Sarah, please.
Thank you, Clement. So very quickly, our fourth speakers will be, we've got Ethel Changa, who's going to talk about the recovery journey and COVID lived experience. We've got Reverend David Perin, Rising Above Depression, Suicide Prevention in Men, which is a very hot topic. I've been getting lots of messages around that. So Reverend, you're in the hot seat for that. We've got Lorraine Sunduza. She's going to talk about PTSD and management on that. And we have Joyce Mbwana talking around listening therapy. We shall introduce each individual speaker more just before they speak. So I have the privilege. For me, this is an absolute privilege of introducing our first speaker, who is Ethel Changa. She is a renowned name within nursing. My path has crossed with her via email, so this is the first time I'm actually seeing her face to face. I'm very excited. So Ethel is a registered mental health nurse and cognitive behavioral therapist. She has over 20 years experience of working in the NHS in various local, regional, and national leadership roles. Ethel is passionate about inclusive leadership and has an ambition to support ethnic minority staff in occupying leadership positions. Ethel's role as a Southeast Regional Lead for the Chief Nursing Officer Black, Minority, and Ethnic Strategic Advisory Group enables her to drive change and shape nursing policy nationally. In March 2021, Ethel launched He Matters Global, an organization that champions men's mental health with a focus on ethnic men and offers culturally adapted therapeutic counseling services for ethnic men. Now, to continue introducing Ethel would take the whole session. She has done so much, but this is her in a nutshell. So Ethel, I'd like to give the floor to you. Welcome.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Salah. You know, it's so fantastic to also meet you. Obviously, I know of you and the great work that you are doing too. You are such an inspiration to me. So I'm glad to be here. And thank you for the invitation. Now, thank you everyone for being here tonight and for the time to speak to you. I hope what I'm going to speak and share is going to empower you, is going to enable you to move to a different level or different sphere of thinking. So tonight I'm going to be talking about my recovery journey around COVID, and I'm going to be talking primarily about some of the things that I put into place after having had COVID and how I have recovered after having this nasty virus that we've had to all kind of live through and actually be in at the moment. So I'm also really excited tonight because Pastor Reverend David is going to be talking about men's mental health, an absolute big passion of mine. And yes, I've launched He Matters Global. It's a charity and it focuses on men's mental health and really around suicide prevention, and also trying to ensure that we don't have an overrepresentation of Black men in our mental health services, which is what we see now. So less accessing primary care, but more represented in our secondary care services. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about my COVID journey. So where do I start? So I had COVID last year. Unfortunately, in March of last year, I found myself actually really unwell. This was at the very beginning of COVID-19. So not many people knew what COVID was about or knew how to treat COVID. Therefore, I found myself in a situation where I was really stuck, but had the symptoms, and not a lot of people could actually tell me what I needed to do or could do. And I remember, you know, the cough, the dry cough, the hard cough, not dry, but really hard cough. I remember my body temperature really escalating. The paramedics had to come twice to my home and try and stabilize things. I felt completely trapped. Now, I live alone with 3 children. I'm a lone parent, and the fear that was in my children's faces, they're all teenagers, but the fear that was in their faces, the fear that I had, having to kind of have this invisible this virus within me that nobody knew about, but also not knowing what I could do to help myself. So I remember feeling so stuck, so trapped, to the point that I started to actually write my plan, as in like who was going to look after my children, what was going to happen at my funeral. And I started, I couldn't tell my kids, but it's something that I just thought, I need to write something down so that there's a clear plan when I actually exit, because I could watch my life slowly slip away. But some of the things that really helped me at that time was text messages from colleagues. So don't underestimate when you text a colleague just to say, how are you? That is extremely important, because it might be the only message that they get to receive of somebody actually checking in on them. And it might be that one thing that actually gives them hope. And for me, it was text messages that were coming in from colleagues. And then I had some colleagues actually calling and praying for me. Now, I'm a Christian, and I found myself unable to even pray for myself, like vocalized prayer. I had to pray in my mind. I had to recite. And I remember Psalm 91, those of you who follow the same faith, I remember reciting Psalm 91, he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And I just remember just reciting it in my head, and people were calling me. I couldn't respond to them, but they were also just praying, and I'll just put it on loudspeaker and just be listening. You know, I felt so stuck, and it made me realize that in life, COVID has amplified a lot of things, but one of the key things that it's done, it's made us turn to our maker. It's made us turn eternally to our source, to our maker, and to God. Because not only I was reaching out to my faith, but I found out afterward that there were so many people that felt nobody could give an answer, but they had to turn back to their creator. So as I did that, I started to get resilience. I started to get strength. I started to pick up. And I believe right now, without a shadow of a doubt, that God gave me a second chance in life. Slowly, I started to recover. Slowly, my temperature started to stabilize. They were contemplating, the paramedics were like, look, we need to take you in, you need to go into hospital. And I was like, look, I knew in my heart of hearts that if I had gone with them, I was never going to come out. I wasn't going to come out. So I thought to myself, it's better that I stay at home. And if I'm going to go in my house and at least surrounded by the people I love, who are my children. So anyway, fast forward, because we don't have time, I want to focus more about after the recovery. So I believe that God gave me a second chance. And this is why now, as a nurse working in the NHS, it's so important that as part of our people plan and our well-being strategy, that we're incorporating faith and spirituality into our well-being plan for our staff. And already that's happening within the NHS. And it's so great to hear that we've got prayer rooms. We call them prayer rooms or quiet rooms or whatever we call them within our workplaces, because I found that even after my recovery, walking into work and being able to go into a prayer room, not to ask for anything, but just to say, God, thank you that you've given me another chance to actually be in work, to actually be back on my feet again. And as I was doing that, at the same time, watching colleagues around me, hearing that so-and-so has died, so-and-so has died, so-and-so has died, it's like, God, how grateful am I for giving me this chance. So that's one thing that I want us to take away today, is really about bringing our whole selves into work. What are we doing as leaders? What are you doing within your workplace to ensure that we as staff members are bringing our whole selves into work, our spirituality, our faith, because COVID has made us really hold on to that bit and hold on to our faith. So fast forward, what did I learn after my recovery? These are the things, the nuggets that I'm hoping that you can take away as well. And I've got so much to say, so please keep me check on time. Let me know when I'm 5 minutes. I've got 5 minutes left. So the recovery. So the prayer helped. But one thing that I realized was the time that I was ill, my neighbors are the ones, remember I said I'm a lone parent and I live with my children, though they're teenagers, they still needed that, the cooked food, and I couldn't cook for them. But it was my neighbors who'd come and leave food at the door. What has that taught me? It's taught me that it's important to connect with your community. When you wake up and you're going to work, to not ignore your neighbor, say good morning to your neighbor. How are you? Stop and listen to the answer. Connect with your community, because you never ever know the time that you're going to need them. So that's one key thing that I learned, because it was my neighbors that were cooking for my children. Had I not had that relationship, my kids would have had to fend for themselves. The next thing that came out with regards to the recovery, I realized that there were so many thoughts that were going in my mind. Yes, I had the trauma. So I'm so glad you're talking about trauma this evening. I had that trauma experience. No one can ever prepare you for having death face you right in your face. No one can ever describe it. It's hard to describe in words, but I believe I was at that stage where I was completely traumatized. Had it not been for my faith that helped me cushion that, I don't know if I would have survived that. So the trauma, and also the attached to the trauma was the thoughts that were going in my mind that as a senior leader within the NHS, I need to be back to work. My colleagues need me. So there was something about me needing to get back to work, but I knew that I wasn't 100% well. So what did I do? I went back to work when I wasn't feeling 100%. Why did I do that? I did it because there was a number of things that were going through my mind. And I realized that so many of us think the same thoughts. One, I don't want to lose my job, which obviously is a flawed way of thinking. Number two is like, oh my goodness, I have to go there and support my colleagues because they need me. I never stopped to think, but Ethel, you need you. You need to kind of have some self-compassion towards yourself. You're a wounded soldier and you want to go back onto the battlefield, but you're not completely healed. What good are you going to be to those people out there? So anyway, to fast forward, I went back to work prematurely without having completely healed. My managers were really great, actually. They supported me. We did all the risk assessments and everything. And but I felt in my head that I needed to just be there. And in hindsight, I think I could have taken a little bit more time and had been a bit more self-compassionate towards myself and actually waited until I recovered. So as a result of that, the post-viral fatigue kicked in like really badly, really terribly. I mean, I would drive to work and I'll get there and all I'd want to do was lie down. I was useless in work, actually, to the point that I actually had to leave work, and it took me 3 solid months to recover. During that recovery time, these are the things that I did. I realized that as a Black woman, that I did not really know much about my own physical health. I realized that I wasn't one of those people that would go and have my routine checks, that would always be thinking about, okay, what am I eating? I would just be coming home and doing something really fast for myself, really fast for the kids, never really mindful of, okay, the things I'm eating, are they nutritional to my body? Now, COVID forced me into that space where I had to start thinking about, what am I eating? What am I putting in my system? Because I was forced to recover. I was forced to do that because there was no other way that I could go around it. So I had to learn food. I had to learn the food that I eat. I had to learn that actually you're not to be an emotional eater, which is what I was. I had to learn about my body needs protein. My body needs carbohydrates. My body needs fats. I had to learn about portion control. I had to learn about, okay, what portion of proteins do I need, rather than, okay, I need donuts and I'm feeling stressed. I need to go and raid the biscuit tin. So I learned how to start enjoying broccoli, how to start enjoying carrots, how to start enjoying real food as a result that aided my recovery. The other thing that aided my recovery was sleeping. How many times do we kind of always work 24? We're always on, always on. We've got our Twitters are buzzing. 12 midnight, we're responding to tweets. We're always online. Work finishes at 5. We're always on. We're answering emails at midnight. I learned that actually, Ethel, you need to have a work-life balance. You need your sleep. Your body needs to have that restorative sleep. So I started to really get back into that mode and to that place where I understood what sleep was. Obviously, as a psychotherapist, I teach people, I run workshops on sleep hygiene. I'm talking to people about sleep hygiene, but actually, was I applying it to myself? Not in the best way. So I learned sleep hygiene. So I want to say to people who are on this call today, yes, you love your job. Yes, you need to answer those emails. But if your system and your body does not get that restorative sleep, you'll be sat in that meeting making mistakes. You'll be sat in that meeting talking and not coherent because your system has not rested. So I just want to say to us, let us get into a place where we are doing a good work-life balance. We go to work, we give input into work, we come back home, we need downtime, we need time to switch off, we need time to rest. So sleep is really, really important. And there's colleagues after having had this journey and walked this journey of discovery. When I was speaking to colleagues, there are things like, actually, there's some colleagues who work 9 to 5 and then go and do a night shift and working night and day. Why are you working night and day? I need to look after my family who are back home. I need to build a house back home. I need to do this back home. I need to do that back home. I need to send money back home and take these 10 people to school. That is really good, because a lot of us who came here, we came here to do those things. But are you being realistic in the things that you're doing? Is it realistic to be doing those 20 things that need you to input 2,000 pounds of your salary every month, meaning you have to work night and day to be able to satisfy those needs? Is it realistic? So the conversation I have with people is, come on, let's be realistic. Yes, you need to look after people, support them in their upkeep, but really, instead of sending 500 pounds every month for people to buy their food and their upkeep, really, do you need to send, can you just really work it out with them? Maybe you just need to be sending 100 pounds, that you're supporting them, but you also need to be supporting yourself. You are trying to portray something that you're not, in the sense that you're in UK and you need to kind of be looking after the whole village. Yes, it's good. It's a good thing to do, but be realistic about what you can do. Balance it out. You don't want, and I know, I mean, I could talk about that for a long time, but actually I'll pause there. So the message there is be realistic in how we balance and how we manage our monies. That's another thing, how we manage our monies, because if we don't do it in the right way, then obviously it's going to exacerbate and cause a stress. And then the other thing that I learned during this journey as part of my recovery was, let's wake up with gratitude. Give me a warning of five minutes. We need to wake up with gratitude. I learned that it is important to just be thankful every day. When you get home, those people who you live with in your home, just saying good morning, loving them, operating for a place of love and a place of compassion. For me, what's important for me now, when I get home, hugging my kids, sitting and hugging my kids. When I finish work, close, I want to hug and cuddle my kids, because that is what, if I lose my job, they will replace me. But if my kids lose me, who's going to come and be mom? So those are the important. So I learned about what are the important things? How do I balance that? The other thing was really around exercise. I had to start retraining my lungs so that they pick up, and also with the fatigue. So I started going for walks. I was one person, I would sign up to the gym and never really go. But then now I've realized that the best things in life are free. It's the fresh air. It's the going for walks. And at the beginning, when I was told by my doctor, my homeopathic doctor, to start doing walks, I thought, going for walks and then jogs, I just thought, oh, this is not my thing. But I started just 10 minutes a day. Today, I walked 2 hours. Now I go for a walk, and I walk for a long time. Why? Because I had to start and gradually increase the times that I do that. And how has that helped? It's helped me get mental clarity. It's helped me actually with the recovery from COVID and the fatigue. It's also helped me, thank goodness, lose weight, because I've lost tons and tons of weight, changing my eating habits, changing my day-to-day routine. And actually, the best things in life are free. Try it. Just try going for a walk to the end of the road and coming back. It'll do your mind and your health wonders, and it's done wonders for me. So diet, and also just those little tiny steps. And then let's have self-compassion, guys. Let's be compassionate to ourselves. We matter. The people around us really, really matter. Let's take those breaks at lunchtime at work. We want to be heroes, but we need to start be heroes to ourselves first, and learn how to balance our lives first. Learn what is realistic about what we can and can't do. And that's going to help our mental wellness and our mental well-being as well. What I want to leave you with is, let's use the staff networks that we already have within the NHS and within our job roles as nurses. We've got staff networks. If you feel that your voice cannot be heard within your organization, if in terms of maybe adjustments that you need to be made for you, then use the staff networks to help you amplify your voice. And then also, do not ignore what your body is telling you. If your body is saying you need rest, take the rest. My rest had to actually be a forced rest, in the sense that I couldn't work. I just couldn't work. I had to take the 3 months off, and then I had to recover. But then obviously, thank goodness that now I'm back in work and I'm able to kind of and able to do my role. So I'll stop there, because I know I'm out of time. And I hope you found that useful. And I hope you've got nuggets that you're taking away, and that you're going to actually start to adapt, because your mental wellness is absolutely pivotal. And everything starts with here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethel. You are actually on time. So I was about to give you a 5-minute warning, but you've done really well. Thank you so much for putting that succinctly and in a manner that is adaptable, because I think one of the key things is that people are looking for nuggets on how to cope and how to recover. My one question for you is, a lot of us who come from Africa or the Caribbeans or from a different culture, we have, like you were talking about, a lot of responsibility. And because we have a lot of responsibility, taking time out for self-care, even when we're ill and things have happened to us, brings about a guilty complex. I wanted to ask, how did you overcome that? So how did you not feel guilty to say, let me take time to myself? and just focus on me?
Well, you know what? That's a really good question, because you know what I realized? First of all, I'll go back to what I said previously is I realized what life is all about. I realized I had to recalibrate what is important in life. And I had to realize that the life that I live, I've been given for a purpose, and to fulfill a purpose, I have to be well first before I'm able to be a good mother and support my kids. That is my first ministry, my home. It starts in the home, because I remember I said, if anything happens at work, they'll replace you in 1 week, but home is home. So I had to start with my home, getting my home in order, getting things in my home in order, but also making sure that I am well. So I I think the near death experience made me realize that actually I have to amplify the compassion towards myself, and actually this guilt thing that a lot of us have felt, and maybe some still feel now, we have to put to one side and think, actually I'm helping you by helping me. So if I'm well, then I am able to help you in a different way and in a more productive way. And that's in a nutshell, that's how I've took it, that's how I've done that.
Yeah, we cannot pour from an empty cup, can we?
No.
No. So I got a question here. It says, because you talked about how faith has played a really important part in your recovery, and you said there was a moment where you couldn't pray. What our audience would like to know is, when you couldn't pray, what did you do? Because people become overwhelmed and you go into shock and everything stops. How did you overcome that?
Yes, and the time that I don't know if somebody else was coming. Okay, so when I couldn't pray, oh, that's a really good question. Whoever's asked that, it amplified and made me realize, is that someone wanting to come in, or is it okay? It made me realize that when I was growing up as a young child, and even my mom was a Christian, we always used to tell us about reciting the word of God and keeping the word of God within us. And remember, I said I couldn't speak it, but in my mind, I was just reciting the word of God, reciting the word of God. And 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 that is the thing that helped me. And then also just putting music. Oh my goodness. You know, I mean, I could talk to you about my routine and my spiritual, my faith, Christian thing. Music, music transforms the atmosphere. All I do is just put on a worship song. I'll just put worship on, let it play in the background, and be reciting my scriptures in my head. And that's all I could do. That's all I was able to do. So when you kind of reach that place where you're almost giving up, you don't know what words to say, you're in so much pain, you just kind of allow those kind of things to help you shift the atmosphere. And at the same time, that those scriptures that you read, because I meditate on the word of God every morning. I take an hour every single morning. I don't start the day without prayer. So I'm reciting the word of God, I'm keeping it within me. And when those dark hard moments come, I just speak it. I just recite it within me, within my head, within my mind, and also just use music to help me. And when I do those long walks, I forgot to mention, when I go for the long walks, I'm always either listening to music, listening to a sermon, or reading books. I read I've got 10 books in my audio library, and I read 3 books at a time. So again, I'm doing things that are helping and edifying me, because I must tell you, people who are on this line, never take this life for granted. It can slip away just like that. And we really need to embrace every single moment and be grateful. Gratitude will do wonders. Where there's gratitude, you cannot have fear, you cannot have anger, you cannot have anxiety. That's why gratitude is one of those things that I wake up, I hit the ground. God, I'm grateful. Thank you for today.
Fantastic. Can I just ask you one more question? That would be my last question. So a lot of us on this line, we tend to come from a background where faith plays a big role of who we are as individuals, but we do come across colleagues who do not believe in higher power, who may not ascribe or prescribe to a certain belief or faith. What advice would you give in terms of either supporting them when they are going through trauma and looking at recovery?
So that's a really good question again. So I was faced with that because what I then did after COVID is we set up a spirituality staff network. I don't know if other organizations have them. If you don't have it, set one up, a spirituality staff network. The reason why we call this spirituality is because it's about you reconnecting with yourself. It's reconnecting with who you are, reconnecting with whatever your belief is, whatever you believe in. And that was our basis. So it was not really about imposing my faith and my beliefs to other people. But during that time, I also had an opportunity to talk, for example, about my story, like I'm talking to you now, and also give a Bible verse and say, oh yeah, I want to leave everybody with this. Those of you who found this useful, here's my Bible verse that I want to share with everybody. People who might not even have read the Bible will listen. They won't be critical of it, but they'll know that this is what I do. So we're all respectful of each other's beliefs. And I think it's not about enforcing our beliefs on anybody else, but it's allowing people to connect. So you see, it's about connecting with something else within you, your soul, your spirit. Some people call it their soul, some people call it their spirit, some people call it the universe, some people call it whatever it is, but it's about that realignment and that reconnection is all we want people to do. And whatever it is just about connect with that, because no one can actually help you at sometimes, but that connection and that alignment sometimes is the only thing that can actually help you and give you that hope that you need.
Thank you so much for that. I think, yes, we have sort of had that 5 minute of Q&A. I know there's lots more questions. And just to let the audience know, Ethel will not be with us until the very end. So I'm going to give you one more opportunity to sum up in 1 minute everything that you have said. What would be the key thing you want us to take away from today before you go?
The first thing is realign with who you are as a person. The next thing is understand that you are on this earth for a purpose and a plan, and you've got to live it. Understand, be realistic with the things that you can and can't do. Before looking after anybody else, look after yourself. That's why even on the airplane, they say put the mask on yourself first before you even help anybody else. You come first. Be self-compassionate first. Tell those people back home that I cannot send 500 anymore, but now I can only do 50 pounds a month. Why? Because you're doing something that is logical and that removes the stress off you. And then also exercise. You know what? Start small. Exercise. I wasn't an exerciser, but now I go out every day. Start 10 minutes a day is good. Change. Start to enjoy real food. Try it. You know what? A floret of broccoli is actually cheaper than actually buying a ready-made lasagna, you know, that you would buy, because that's what I used to do. And it's actually more enjoyable and more filling. Try real food, exercise, and sleep. Please, when it's time to finish work, close your laptop, go and sit in your garden, or go and do something, or just sit and look at the sky. Just switch your mind off to something else. Those are the key things that I would leave with everyone. Look after yourself and get yourself vaccinated if you haven't done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. On that note, thank you so much, Ethel, for your time and for sharing such an intriguing and marvelous lived experience, and for all those nuggets that you've given us. I know that everybody on the line has been taking notes. I'm taking notes, and thank you. I know you will have to slip out, so thank you so much. If I don't get a chance for you to say that before you slip out.
No problem. I'm going to stay for a little while, and then I'll go at some point. I think I'll stay for about 30 more minutes, and then I'll go.
Okay, thank you. Clement, are you happy to introduce our next speaker?
Yes, I am. That was a wonderful presentation from Ethel. Thank you so much for that wonderful insight presentation. Now, our next speaker is Reverend David Perin. David Perin, he is a safeguarding and behavior trainer and a consultant with over 30 years in that field. Up to date, he has got so many contacts working with NHS here in UK, and he has also done some presentation in schools as well. Just to let you know, in 2008, specifically, it was in November, David was summoned to Buckingham Palace, where he met the Queen Elizabeth II plus the late husband, Prince Philip, in recognition for his work across 2 local authorities here in the UK plus in Malawi. His main aim is to serve God with everything and help to build a better people. So with that short introduction to David, I'll leave the floor for him to take over. David, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Clement, for that lovely introduction. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, depending upon which part of the world you are. I'll greet you in the name that stands above every other name, the name of Jesus Christ, our soon and coming King. Without him, we would be nothing. Thank you very much for the invite, Mbwana and Mrs. Charity Gladstone. As you know, I was speaking to you briefly, or sharing with you briefly, on the subject of rising above depression and suicide against men. I want to share some feedback. I'll be sharing on a few points, namely, we'll have a quick look at statistics and figures. We'll probably have a bit of fun with that. We'll have a look at a biblical character who experienced depression, mental ill health. We'll also be looking at signs and symptoms of depression. And finally, we will end with rising above and the journey out. Rising above and the journey out. So, in terms of a few stats, let's have a bit of fun. Mbwana, we'll have a little bit of a competition. I'll ask a few questions. You can have 4 or 5 seconds to answer questions via the chat. And Mbwana have agreed to give the winner £500. No, I'm joking. But we'll have a bit of fun. Anyway, number 1, higher or lower than 50% of individuals with mental health difficulties face stigma. Would you say it's higher or lower? We've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The answer is 90%. 90% of people who have mental health issues face stigma. And that's a big message, even that in itself. Number 2, higher or lower, again, than 50%. 50% of suicides are men. 50% of suicides are men. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 75% of all suicides are men. This one's a true or false. Worldwide, 1 man dies from suicide every 5 minutes. True or false? 1 man dies from suicide every 5 minutes. 3, 2, 1. In fact, 1 man dies from suicide every single minute. That's 1 per minute. Higher or lower? 50% of men would rather be known for having a short fuse than being known to be vulnerable. 50% of men would rather be known for having a short fuse, a temper, kicking off, than known to be vulnerable. And in fact, 67%, 2/3 of men with mental health issues would rather be known for having a short fuse than be known to be vulnerable. True or false? 1 in 8 people will experience a mental health issue each year. 1 in 8 people will experience a mental health issue each year. And the answer is, in fact, 1 in 4. So I believe there's, 60 odd of us on this format. So we're talking probably about 15, a little bit over, will have suffered a mental health issue this year. But with regards to the pandemic, that number would be significantly higher. True or false? Let's talk about Black men specifically just for a moment. We know that from Black people perspective, there are a lot of disparities, not just here in England, worldwide. Here in England, for example, Black boys are over 3 times more likely to be excluded from school, 7 times overrepresented in the prison system. So this one, true or false? Black men suffer from psychotic mental health 2 times. This is twice as much than white men. True or false? And it's actually false. Black men suffer 10 times more from psychotic episodes than white men. Black people are just as likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act as their white counterparts. Black men are just as likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act as their white counterparts. Also, if I add on to that, given higher doses of medication. In fact, 4 times more likely, 4 times more likely. And then even if we look from a medication perspective, they're more likely to be pumped with medication. And just a few more to finish off the stats. In the UK, 84 men die per week from suicide. Black people are 40% more likely to enter the mental health system via the criminal justice system rather than via primary care. The biggest killer of men under 45 is suicide. And I know it's grim reading, without a shadow of doubt, that a lot of that is grim reading. But I've got to say, there is hope. There is hope. Because when we look at characters from the Bible, there are many characters in the Bible that suffered with mental health issues, that suffered with depression. And if I was to give a definition, a simple definition of depression, it would be mild depression has a minor negative impact on daily living, whereas major depression has a significant negative impact on daily living. And that's a very general, basic definition. When we look at some of the characters in the Bible that suffered with depression or mental health issues, they included Naomi, the mother-in-law of Ruth. They included Moses, King Saul, Job, Jonah, Jeremiah, even Jesus himself, knowing what he was going to go through. But the person I want to just concentrate on just for a moment is David. Yes, David, that great David who was called out above all his brothers. Yes, the same David that defeated Goliath when nobody else wanted to fight him. That same David that comforted King Saul when he was depressed, when he was low, when he was having a difficult time. That same David that King Saul went off after his life many times. And he shares in a number of scriptures about his depression. And the one I have singled out today is from Psalms 42 and verse 5, and it reads, "Why are you cast down, O my soul? And why are you disquieted within me? Hope in God, for I shall yet praise him for the help of my countenance." David had many periods of depression, anguish, loneliness, fear of the enemy. He had troubles when the times he committed sins and it broke his own heart. But yet David didn't stay there. So depression. Signs and symptoms, some signs and symptoms. And this information is good for us to know. Signs and symptoms: hopelessness, depressed mood, sleep changes, appetite changes, loss of interest in activities, inability to complete tasks, decreased energy, difficulty concentrating, increased guilt, suicidal thoughts, self-harm, drained, burnt out, emotional depletion, single status, relationship breakdown, financial difficulties. And the experts say that if you have 5 or more of these, it's imperative to seek medical help. And some people in here might be thinking, well, as a Christian seeking medical help, but surely faith and the word of God would play the only role. But God wouldn't give us the gift of the beautiful and great, blessed doctors and nurses on this forum if it wasn't for his purpose. So let's talk a little bit then about rising above and the journey out. Rising above and the journey out. You see, we're going to fit in 2 camps here. And in fact, some of us will fit in both camps at the same time or at various times. But we have 2 camps, one camp being the supporter and the other camp being the supported. The supporter, those of us that need to give or are giving support to the supported, who are the ones that are going through. And the following, and I suppose you can pick out for yourself what is relevant for whether it's the supporter or the supported. Number 1, when there's a supported, do not judge. The Bible talks about judge not, or you will be judged with the same judgment. Empathize. Put yourself in their shoes. The supported, those of you that are going through, don't be shy to talk. I know it's going to be difficult. I know it's hard, but trust in God. Talk to somebody. There are many people out there to talk to. You would be very surprised. Another important one, from our brothers especially, cry. Cry. Bawl. Shed the high water. You know, something I admire about my Malawian sisters. You know, the first time, well, not the first time, one of the times I went to Malawi and went to a funeral, and the way that people mourn on the death of a loved one, females mourn. At first I was a bit taken back. You know what I mean? I look at Jamaican background, born in England, you know what I mean? But my ancestry is African. But I was a bit taken back when I saw the level of mourning. And I thought to myself, bless God, but it needs to come out. It needs to come out, because if we bottle it in, we will burst. So what I'm saying to the brothers, cry. And the other thing about crying is that's being authentic, especially to our children. Other forms of support come from the church. Church groups. Ethel, bless God for your presentation, Ethel, spoke about in the workplace, setting up various forums, various groups to work with individuals or support individuals that are going through or may be going through, or helping somebody who may, a loved one of theirs that may be going through. Scripture. For me, you can't beat scripture. You can't beat prayer. You can't beat fasting. But as well as the spiritual, we've got to look at the physical and we've got to look at the emotional. And I loved what Ethel said about exercise, getting out into that great, blessed, fresh air and breathing in the air that God has blessed us with. Socializing. You can even go down the pub, you know. Oh, sorry, did I say something wrong for Christians? It's okay. There's people out there that need our support. People oftentimes that we would not even imagine. Brothers, let's check a bro. Check a bro. If you're going through yourself, check a bro. If you're not going through, find somebody that's going through. Check a bro. Show some love, man. God is love. So if God is love, we must be of love ourselves. And accountability. And something I set up years ago. Accountability. And what this basically means is that I've got 4 or 5 brothers that we could go to each other at any time. We know so much about each other that we set up a little group. and we'll touch base with each other. And for example, because we're talking about depression, mental health, etc. today, if we know that somebody's going through our time through depression, mental health issues, etc., we will make sure we touch base with him. We will make sure one of us, two of us, etc., will go and visit, take time out. I know the sisters are brilliant at that. I think a lot of sisters do this naturally. You know, a lot of sisters, you could talk for England, Malawi, America, Trinidad and Tobago, and the rest of the world. It's good to talk. It's good to have people that we're accountable to, and vice versa. And the importance of medication, the importance of therapy, please do not underestimate it. Very important. If someone had cancer, you wouldn't just say, let's pray for them, lay hands on them. We would expect them to have treatment. If somebody had diabetes, if somebody broke a leg, in the same way, if somebody has got mental health issues, depression, we should be supporting them to seek professional support, help, and advice, especially from our medical experts. Because if we don't, let's think about what happens to one who has cancer but didn't have treatment, one who has diabetes but did not have medical treatment, one who's broken a leg or had a serious cut somewhere and he didn't have treatment. It will bring on death earlier. So why don't we have the same, oftentimes have the same mindset when it comes to depression? Ethel also mentioned worship. One of the things for me is worship. Worship, when I'm going through, I love to worship. Sometimes I find it hard, especially when I'm going through, but worship just does something. It reaches the part that nothing else could touch, that worship in the name of Jesus. And remember, as we said, therapy, counseling, CBT, psychotherapy, it all plays a significant part in rising above and journeying through. And in closing, I just want to speak to those of us that may be going through at this moment in time. And from 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, this is for you. You are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. You see, you are God's handiwork. You are more than enough. Faith. Have faith. Have faith in God. Put your faith in God and he will take you through. You see, weeping may endure for a night, but thank God that joy comes in the morning. He will not put more on you than you could bear. Again, like Ethel said, she had scriptures and Psalms 91, he that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High. Find the scripture, own in on it. And you know something, don't trust me, trust God. God will do a work in your life. And sorry, in closing, can I just encourage us to do one thing? Just write something for you. What do you do for your personal well-being? One thing that you do for yourself. Just one thing. Write it down somewhere. Type it down somewhere. You know, maybe at the end of the night, Sarah and Charity, somebody may share some of it, because it's something I do in training. At the end of the training session, whatever training session it is, I'll get everybody in the room to share one thing that they do for themselves for their own personal well-being. And what this does, other people in the room will think to themselves, you know something, I want to check that, I want to do that, I want to try that. And before you know it, our well-being starts to increase. Remember, you're chosen by God, you're loved by God. I love you, but God loves you best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Sarah.
Yeah, I think that deserves a resounding amen and hallelujah.
Yeah.
That touched my spirit, man. What you were talking about just touched my spirit, man, and has given me some hope and uplifting. And it is wonderful to hear that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. I think when you see the light at the end of the tunnel, it gives you something to fix on. And God is our anchor. That's what I'm hearing from you. There are so many questions brewing because you have touched on such a big topic, but we will save them for the end. So please, anybody who's got questions, put them in the chat, and I would encourage each one of us as well just to write what Reverend Perin has suggested. Write your one thing that you do. So we're going to collate this and see if we can share them at the end, and hopefully we can all learn from one another. And I would like to stay on time, so I'm going to move on to our next speaker. Just to let you know, we are trying to be as inclusive as possible. So we have our speakers are coming across from Malawi, Zimbabwe, and Jamaica. And our next speaker, I would like to claim her as one of our own. Even though she's from Zimbabwe, I know that her great-grandfather is from Malawi. So Nwatu. So we have Lorraine Sunduza, who is working with East London NHS Foundation. She's worked there for the past 10 years and is there currently as the chief nurse. Lorraine has over 20 years experience as a registered nurse. She started her career working in adult mental health inpatient services and then joined the East London NHS Foundation in 2002 as a charge nurse in the Forensic Directorate in 2010. Lorraine was, in 2010, she was appointed as the head of nursing for Forensic Services, and in 2015 was appointed as Deputy Director of Nursing for London Mental Health. She became interim chief nurse in November 2017 and substantially appointed in June 2018. So her background and qualifications, she's a registered mental health nurse and is a Myers-Briggs Step 2 administrator. So Lorraine, I want to be you when I grow up, which is only 2 years time from here. I would like to give the floor to you.
Good evening, and thank you so much for welcoming me. But yes, you're right. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, but my grandfather, my father's father, was from Malawi. So I do claim some Malawi nurse in all of this. Thank you very much. So in terms of me, my interest generally is mental health, but I'm also really interested in leadership, organizational development, and also equalities, particularly as a Black African woman living and working in London as well. It's really hard to follow the last two speakers. Some of the stuff that you touched on, I was going to talk about as well, so I'll try and skip over them to give us a bit more time for questions at the end, and apologies if there's any time there's some form of repetition. So I'm going to talk about trauma, and you could say that what we are all experiencing in the world is quite a traumatic global event. And as much as the world is experiencing this, we do know that some of us will experience it a bit more than others because of other things that happen within all our lives. So PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, can be described as an anxiety disorder, which is caused by very stressful, frightening and distressing event. It's an emotional response to an event that is very stressful. And actually the word trauma comes from the Greek word for wound. So when you're hurt, so sometimes you'll even hear people talking about a gun trauma in terms of a wound that is extremely deep and has an impact on you. Generally, as human beings, when we're exposed to something quite stressful or traumatic, as it were, we do one of three things. It's either we fight it, we run away from it, which is usually termed flight, or we freeze. There's nothing that can alert you to which of these things will happen to you. And it's not a weakness if you respond in any of these ways, because it's usually an unexpected thing that happens to you, or something that you witness, something that you see. So that's why sometimes you hear people being quite traumatized by witnessing something that is extremely distressing, and it can be either acute, chronic, or quite complex. And it can set in almost immediately, and it can also set in as much as a year after the event. So that's why it makes it quite difficult to gauge it as well. Many people will experience a traumatic memory. So there's something about, you know, when something happens to you and you keep seeing it and you keep reliving it, and when you're within that experience, it feels like you're back where you experienced the trauma itself. And sometimes memories can be overwhelming for people, and that's why sometimes some people can't understand why something that happened to you so long ago, why is it still impacting you, even if you physically have been removed by the threat that caused you to experience the trauma itself. So what we sometimes do is we will then do things to try and forget about it, or we will try and avoid it. And those things we can consciously do it, or sometimes we can subconsciously do it. So you know how you do things without necessarily thinking about it, but you find a way of being quite avoidant. So people will avoid crowds, will avoid places and spaces, or watching and exposing themselves to things that will remind them of something that's quite traumatic, or we will try and find strategies to block it. Now, these strategies can be quite good strategies, but sometimes they can be strategies which in the end themselves can hurt us. So even that's why when I was talking about doing things to avoid, can actually be something like drinking alcohol or taking drugs, because sometimes that puts you in a space where you then don't have to deal with the issue. And then you may need to do it more and more often because you're really trying to numb yourself from the pain. Now, trauma, it can show itself in so many ways. And I think some of the symptoms that Reverend Dave talked about earlier are actually similar in terms of depression and also things related to trauma. So you can have intrusive thoughts, so thoughts that come. I'm seeing a note saying, are we able to hear? Can people not hear me?
So I just got a message from Fida. She says she can't hear you. I can hear you. I believe, I don't know, that's why I put the message there. People can hear you. I think it might just be particular to her. I've asked her to just re-log in. Yeah.
Okay, because I don't, okay, all right. That's fine. If there's any bits that people miss, you can always ask me later. So so some of the symptoms of how trauma can sort of manifest itself is similar to the symptoms of depression as well. That's why whenever you feel abnormal, not with yourself, it's very good to seek professional help. So that can be explored, because a lot of us, including myself as a nurse, I self-diagnose. And one of the deadly things is Google. And Google can convince you of so many things. So there's something about, yes, owning it, but you know yourself. You know when something is not quite right for you and you're responding differently, but also trusting those around us who know us. So when they say, you know, you're not quite right, and then going to get some sort of validation or second opinion from a trained professional. So things like hopelessness as well. So not seeing any light at the end of any tunnel, feeling that everything is really bleak. Like I talked about, self-destructive behaviors, and this can happen in so many ways, that actually things that you're trying to do to either stimulate you so much so you don't have to think and deal with the trauma at hand. You can have decreased concentration. You can't stick to one thing because your thoughts are racing. Lack of sleep. I think Ethel mentioned what lack of sleep can do to you, but sometimes that lack of sleep itself is actually a symptom of something, irritability. And sometimes that can then affect your eating, but also, like I said, taking drugs and drinking more. And also it can manifest itself in the form of a panic attack. Sometimes trauma is caused by adverse childhood events. And these are particularly for people who experience something quite traumatic before their 18th birthday. And there are a variety of things that can cause this. And that's sometimes, like I said, seeing things or experiencing things, so neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, particularly before the age of 18. And unfortunately, when there's a sustained experience of trauma, this can have an impact on someone's life right all the way through to adulthood, even up until and including death. Now, some examples, just to touch on a few things that can contribute to sort of having sort of a traumatic experience, are things like domestic and family violence. And sadly, all too often we hear about it, and even within this country, in England, it's shocking the amount of women who actually in the end die at the hands of partners. Although I do appreciate that domestic violence can be women to men, and it can be also high in same-sex relationships, but we know that women particularly are vulnerable, and we've seen this number sort of explode, particularly with lockdown and people being confined in spaces without the usual escapes that we all have, like going to work, going to the gym, going to see friends, so being literally stuck indoors and having to deal with some of the stresses that have come with the pandemic. Community violence as well. So maybe living in an area where violence is almost the norm, and living in fear of your surroundings as well can be quite traumatic. Abuse, and this can be sexual, this can be physical, natural disasters, and we've seen a lot of it. I did my training in Leicester, and I remember a time when a number of people came from Montserrat, an island in the Caribbean, because they had quite a massive volcano that completely displaced people almost overnight, to a point where families in their hordes had to move to different countries. And now that's quite traumatic. You living in sunny Caribbean, next thing you know, you're stuck in grey, raining, quite cold England, and it's not from you choosing to do so. Severe car accidents as well, either witnessing or being part of that as well. Now, sadly, and I think it was touched on earlier, that the most tragic ending of someone who's experiencing post-traumatic stress, and just to caveat that by saying that not necessarily everybody who's got trauma in their lives will experience this, is suicide. And that's unfortunately a leading cause of death right across the world. And sometimes suicide attempts may alert you, and even if they're not completed, so the person doesn't die, may alert you that there is a serious problem. And unfortunately, sometimes people who attempt suicide later go to complete it. Sometimes it could be really pronounced, wanting and a wish to die, to end their life, because it's linked to that sense of hopelessness, that there's no ending to the pain and suffering that is sometimes is only within, and it's really hard for people to see that it had gotten to that point where someone thought that the only way was to completely end their lives. And I suppose just to also put some sort of context, so in preparation to this, I started to think about sort of Malawi exactly as a country, and it was sad to hear that the leading causes of deaths were road traffic accidents and suicides, particularly in men. And there is, within all of this, there's a COVID context to this, particularly if we think about COVID is one of, hopefully for me, it's the only time, either in my career or my personal life, I experience something like this. It has been absolutely horrendous. I am fortunate to say that in terms of my close family, I've not lost anyone to COVID, but my sister became quite unwell. And sadly, I lost a cousin in April last year. Now, the challenge with that, as it was alluded to earlier, was in terms of some of our cultural rituals. In terms of mourning, we couldn't do that. So his funeral was actually 7 of us going to see him in a funeral parlor in Leytonstone, and going in one at a time to see him in a room where he was lying. Because of COVID, we couldn't congregate. We couldn't congregate indoors. I couldn't comfort my aunt over days as we usually do. So that sense of being able to mourn for him was lost. Then there was the added stress of trying to arrange for his body to go home, and all the things that we needed to do that. And even when my aunt went home, she couldn't immediately go to our family. She had to stay in a hotel for 14 days, quarantine, and then go and bury her son. And this was some time after the end. So it's almost like re-traumatizing by starting again when she got to Zim, like day 1 of the funeral. And many of us couldn't join her because of the circumstances we find ourselves in. And then there's all those other anxieties, which although the cases are going down, the reality of that is starting to come for a lot of people, particularly about financial security, about what's going to happen. We know companies have suffered because of being shut down, thereby jobs have gone. And those jobs have been the lifeline for so many families. And I know we were talking about a lot of us and our families rely on what's called the Black economy, which is money that comes from Western countries, from people working to support and sustain people back home. We know that there's so many children in Africa who go to school because people are working hard in the West to do so. And that's quite a hard thing to carry, about the responsibility that we all have in relation to supporting people at home. I also am aware that some of the suicides, particularly in Malawi, are attributed to people who are living with HIV. And again, it's still male. And you know, in the West, we often talk about HIV now being like a chronic illness that people can live with successfully in relationships. But we know that sometimes with the disparities in terms of what's available, particularly within African countries and African health system, that this may not essentially be the same. Before I go on to some of the things that we all could do, there's also something I want to talk about. And that's particularly for us Black people, there's historical trauma. Now, historical trauma is generational trauma that we face. So we know the impact of a lot of the impact of our lives is based on colonization and through slavery, but there are other ways as well. So like the Holocaust, or like significant things that forced either our tribes or our people to move, which then carry on from generation to generation. I think about myself, I was born 3 years before Zimbabwe became independent. Any of you who are good with your history, you'll be able to work out my age. But that meant I was born in a small little clinic in a high density suburb, because the fact that my mother was Black, she couldn't have given birth to me in the hospital that was only for white people. It's interesting that even some of the difference intergenerationally, because I then grew up in Zimbabwe where I went to school with white children, and I grew up being accustomed to being an equal partner to white people, but actually that's not my parents' experience, and that's not my grandparents' experience. And sometimes there's that then slight difference in terms of even generationally how we interact with the world. But that trauma continues the same. I was speaking to my sister the other day, because I don't know if any of you have seen on Netflix, there's a program called Two Distant Strangers. It's only 30 minutes, short movie. It's really good to watch. But actually, my sister said to me that was quite traumatic, because it's talking about young Black men dying by being shot by police in America. Now, I'm not a Black man. I'm not young either. I'm not American. I've never been shot, but there's something about that experience that every time I hear about it, every time I see it, it kind of jars. And so all those things in the context of the world that we live in really have an additional impact. And then when you have a significant event that then happens in your life, this can be quite overpowering. So I suppose in terms of what helped, there's something about just being trauma informed. So even within our clinical staff, we're thinking about trauma informed care. So in mental health, as it was spoken about earlier, we also see a lot of people who've been through trauma in their lives, experiences, some that actually, when you read some cases in terms of people's life experience, it is actually shocking what people have gone through. So there's something about sensitively coming to work, to think about actually some of those traumatic events that people would have experienced. There's something as well about creating safe, sometimes gender specific spaces. I think it was spoken about earlier about men and what it's like. So there's something about the image of a man and what is classed as strength within men. And if we think about the things I've spoken about loss of job, particularly if they're the ones with the breadwinner in the family, what does that do to that man's psyche in terms of what they represent and the impact of that? So really creating spaces where people can speak about this and people can speak about it openly and sensitively, and sometimes actually separating the genders to give people that safe space to do so. And we've seen it sometimes, particularly with women who are maybe refugees, that we know that rape has been used as a weapon. So expecting people to just open up and say, this happened to me, when it's so painful and so deep is quite hard. So having to create that space, I think giving people time as well. We're all very different. So what works with me is not necessarily what will work with you. So that when we're thinking about what works with something, is actually co-producing it with them, asking out what works with them and trying out different things, seeking professional help. So I was really glad to hear that there's that advice about seeking professional advice, and then you yourself using other ways. I'm very much into, yes, believing about faith and what faith does for you, but yes, do understand that not everyone is either Christian or Muslim, but there's something about spirituality and connecting with your deeper self and connecting with what helps you. Self-care is a big thing, and I know we talked about it a few times here, that as we're kind of raised to be almost selfless, you know, like when we say, particularly in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child, that we are in this together. But sometimes it's that time about taking that step back and thinking what is good for me, and thinking about the long-term plan for yourself to get to that space again, where you can start to enjoy things again, because trauma also does that. It numbs you and it almost kills off some things within you that make you enjoy and appreciate the finer things in life. And giving yourself time, because the thread through some of the things that stop us from looking after ourselves is that guilt and the burden that we carry. And particularly in the NHS where we work, we know about the underrepresentation, particularly of people of ethnic minority, maybe in senior posts. So when you do get there, there's that thing that almost like I'm representing everybody everywhere. So I have to outperform, I have to prove that I am really good enough, as opposed to actually how I am in my natural state is good enough. And forgiving yourself when you do make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, or when there are lapses in any of your practice or anything like that. And all these things that I'm saying is, as much as when we talk about it, it's very easy to think, well, that's common sense, I will do that. But it's easier said than done. And that's where sometimes we all have to manage each other and have to be that friend, have to be that auntie, have to be that colleague that's brave enough and bold enough to speak to someone and to name it. And for some of us, that's all you need, that level of validation that you can pause now to get to a space where we don't need to get that level of permission. So what I'm going to, I don't know about the time. I hadn't kind of rehearsed it to gauge, but I'm going to pause there, and I'm very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I think at the end I will give everybody just a chance to wrap up their thoughts in a small nutshell, because I know there's a lot that we can continue to talk about, and I think maybe some of the questions might answer some of the things that our speakers, all of you, might have missed out or feel is very pertinent for us to know. But thank you so much. That's a good breakdown of what trauma is, because I think a lot of us, we tend to think trauma means that you have to be in a war-torn environment, or, you know, it has to be a dramatic thing. But everybody, every individual is different, and what affects me, that would be traumatic, or they will say it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. So my straw compared to your straw will be two different things. So we have to be able to understand that we're all individuals and we're affected by events differently. And on that note, I'm just going to ask Clement to introduce our last speaker, and then we will go into Q&A. Just to let everybody know, I know that we were aiming for 20:45, but please bear with us. We might get to 9 o'clock, but if our speakers have to leave before then, I would let them go, but we will be open up until then. So Clement, please take it away.
Hi, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for that wonderful presentation from Lorraine. Yes, we need to speak to our bro. We need to create our own space and environment in these circumstances of mental health. Now, let me introduce to you our last speaker is Joyce Mbwana. Joyce, she is a nurse, registered nurse, and she's a public health specialist. She has also worked in hospitals here in England as a volunteer, working as a hospital chaplain. She's very, very passionate in supporting friends and family. Actually, she's also one of the executive members of Mbwana. She has been working, she's got an experience of over 40 years working as in a pastoral care. So Joyce, the floor is over to you. Can you take it over, please, Joyce?
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I just want to thank Mbwana for this initiative. And I want to thank everybody that have taken the time to participate. I'm not going to take long, but I've listened carefully to the speakers that have spoken before me. And I'm going to talk about listening. As easy as it seems, or as easy as it looks, listening is very complex. And can I just read this about listening? Before I go into that definition of listening, I just want to acknowledge how we, as the whole world, are facing this pandemic has caused us, in one way or another, to come together in a way that we have never been before. And listening has never been as important as it is right now. In fact, mental health is a public health. If I can call it a pandemic, it is a public health pandemic, because it's affecting people not just of one age group or one socioeconomic status, but it has affected everybody across the board. So let me just read this about listening. We're talking about listening that brings healing, restores confidence and hope. And for it to be effective, it requires attention and focus. And when you listen to someone, Pastor Reverend Perin said, talk to someone, talk to someone. But a question that people would be asking would be, who do I talk to? Who do I talk to? So in a nutshell, I just want to explain some of the barriers, why people would not want to talk to anybody. And as professionals and as a public as well, because as we are professionals, but we are also the public. We are listeners, but also we want somebody we can talk to. So we fit into two categories. And the listening that I'm talking about is the listening that restores hope, the listening that pays attention, and the listening that allows someone to feel I'm respected, I'm being valued. And I believe if we can look at history, look at things that have happened in people's lives, people who have had traumatic situations, something comes out of how they ended up into that place. Most of them will tell you nobody was listening. And why are people not coming up to talk to someone? Number one, Reverend Perin said stigma. If somebody says they've got diabetes or they've got high blood pressure, people, wouldn't think a thought about it. But mental health, it's your strength. It's your backbone. And very few people would be openly trust anybody to tell them they were struggling. When I worked as a health visitor for nearly 13 years, we used to have a therapy of listening visits. When we do our assessments and we find out somebody's got depression, we would go out every week just to listen. And you can, agree with me. Listening requires patience and understanding. And if I can talk to professionals, are we positioned in that place where we can be non-judgmental, compassionate, trusted, and resourceful? Because as a listener, you are listening to the narrative. You are listening to what somebody is telling you, what they've gone through. Not that you want to offer an answer, but you want them to feel they have solved the problem because you have listened. And when you have listened to someone carefully, it gives them the window of opportunity to reflect and also look at the situation from a different perspective. So I want to encourage professionals. Let us position ourselves as listeners. And as somebody said, I think somebody in literature said this about listening. Let me just read it. It says, attentive listening is pivotal. It is a pivotal skill for any health worker who wants to be a healer. Listening requires patience and endurance, involves understanding people's emotions and the ability to be still. And compassion is a key. Of course, people will not go to somebody they don't trust to talk to them. And the COVID pandemic, especially for the people who are working in healthcare, our patients were trapped. They could not go out to speak to family. The health professionals themselves were also traumatized. As a result, that was a barrier. People would not want to talk to anybody. They would feel we are all in the same boat. But I'm here to say, as professionals and as individuals, like my other colleagues have said, let's open up. Let's create networks. I believe somebody was talking, the first speaker spoke about creating networks, creating friendships, therapeutic friendships, people that we can trust and speak to when we are in need. And I just want to mention here that, when we listen, we give people an opportunity to give them that gap within their thought process to feel that there is hope somewhere. I worked as a volunteer chaplain at the hospital where I worked. And I worked in a multi-faith team. And sometimes as Christians, I'm a Christian as well, we think we can tell people what to do, or we can preach to them so that, you bring them on board. But the ability to just be there and listen, and I can share numerous occasions where I would walk in the ward, just walk in, say hello to patients, and say, I've just come to have a chat. I'm from the hospital chaplaincy team. And believe it or not, people that would open up, go into tears because they've been sitting there waiting just for somebody to talk to. So can I just encourage us that, you know what, let's not be discouraged. I know some people wouldn't want to open up to us because they've been betrayed. And there's issues of confidentiality. Can people trust us with their information? Are we not going to judge them? Are we not going to make them feel like, why are they behaving that way? Another point that I just wanted to mention is about the culture. Certain cultures, like especially culture where I come from, strength. When you talk to people about your issues, it's like you're not strong. It's like, it's a source of weakness. It takes courage to talk to someone about intimate things that are bothering you and making you feel stressful. But I believe as we continue to create opportunities within our friendships, our networks, to be available to people, be available when we are needed, and not judgmental when people tell us about their problems. And I just want to share an example of something that is quite important for me personally. And it's biblical as well. Jesus was a listener. Jesus was somebody that listened. And it's reflected for those of you who read the Bible. There was a woman that, Jesus found as he was traveling on his journeys. And he took time. He spoke and they had a chat and he listened. And as a result of that listening, transformation took place. That woman felt she was valued. Somebody listened to her. She was a loner. She was going to, draw water on her own. And it's a symptom of depression where you feel you are on your own. But Jesus was a listener. And because of listening, that woman was transformed. She gathered the confidence and the courage to go back in the community and face the very community that, she wouldn't talk to. So can I just encourage us as professionals, as well as public, because we are public as well. COVID should help us to see things differently. Who knew that I could be talking to people from different places, people in London, Birmingham, sat in my own house. And apart from just speaking on these platforms, within our communities, within our homes, let's be open. Let's be people that are compassionate and understanding, and give the people the freedom to open up to us. Colleagues, different people that even if take a deliberate effort to talk to people, the elderly are even more vulnerable with the COVID. Some of them will never be able to go out confidently like they did. So let's just encourage each other, create an opportunity to connect with someone you can help. Also, identify people in your circle that you can talk to. So I think for me personally, I feel we are at a very, very crucial time in terms of mental health. If we have to make an assessment, if that was a tool that could help us look at the extent of the mental trauma that has been caused, it is, you cannot even imagine how huge the situation is. But I believe with these platforms, with opportunities that we get within our own homes, within our own workplaces, we will be able to reach out. Even if the situation is so huge, we can be able to reach out to individuals. We can be able to reach out to those that are closest to us and identify, the signs and symptoms that the speakers have spoken about. Be open-minded, and let's just come together as we are doing and create an environment that is accommodating, that does not make people feel rejected because they have disclosed something to us. So unless if I'm sure there will be people who have got questions, but to me personally, what I feel is, again, let me say, listening that restores someone's confidence. Listening that makes somebody feel, I am valued, I'm being respected, my feelings are being acknowledged. We have heard in the papers as well as on the news that, mental health does not select young, old, high profile people. We all go through problems, issues that challenge the resources that we've got. So talking to people is a great opportunity where you can tap into resources that are available around us. No matter how strong we are, no matter how the resources that we've got in terms of money, we will find situations that challenge everything that we know. And that's the time that we need to reach out, talk to people, and let's create a pool of professionals as well as the community. I know a trust, an NHS trust somewhere that has got a community listening chaplaincy service, where the chaplains, create a telephone service and people ring in, which is quite good. And I believe the NHS trust should be looking at, even in hospitals, different places, they should be looking at opportunities to retrain people in issues of listening or just befriending people so they can trust us and be able to come to us. So thank you so much for letting me speak, but I'm passionate about talking to people, and my passion mostly is about the elderly. That's the generation that is, when we look at how they've been impacted by COVID, it's unlike in other countries where community live together. In the Western country, you find the elderly are so isolated. Some of them have lost their loved ones. Some of them have been in institutions without anybody to talk to, without anybody to open up to them. So can I encourage us? Let's take a deliberate effort to look out for those people that need a friend. Let's befriend them and encourage them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Mrs. Mbwana. That is a very, very hot topic, very interesting about listening. There's a lot that's been said around active listening and being a part, being sensitive in terms of listening. And there's also, like you were talking about, issues of confidentiality and trust that goes with that whole concept of listening, which will allow people to open up, to speak to us. So I'm just going to go straight into our Q&A and try to hash it. There's loads of questions. So I will pick up on the issue of listening because that was the last thing that's still very fresh in people's minds. And I'm I'm grouping these questions together. So this is open to everybody on the panel. Now, with regards to listening, there was a question about how does one listen without not just prejudice, but to ensure that they're not taking things home with them. So there's an issue around people who are listeners. I've got an example of a colleague who is within the church, very highly functional individual, and everybody goes to speak to him, as Reverend Perin would be aware and attest to, where as a reverend, people will come with their problems and you listen and you listen. And he called me today and said, Sala, I'm tired, I'm fed up. The other day, I just thought, it's been cold. What if I jumped into a river? It would take me 2 minutes to just sleep peacefully and go quietly. Now, this is a man, highly functional, no mental health issues, and who listens attentively. So how can listeners ensure that they are protecting their mental health as well? Because we have to remember they are taking on other people's trauma. So they're being traumatized as well whilst they're listening.
Okay. Can I respond, or Reverend Perin, do you want to respond to that one?
Reverend Perin, you're on mute if you're going to speak.
Sorry, I was saying, Joyce, if you wanted to come in on that one.
Yes. Yeah, it's very, very true. As a listener, like I said before, it requires endurance, because you are taking you are listening to things that are traumatic. And you as a person, you have to have specific training, orientation, as well as have somebody that you can talk to. When I was working as a health visitor and we did those listening visits, some of them were traumatic. There is peer supervision. So apart from yourself that, this is, you go back to the office, you talk to someone. Not to talk to someone, you get supervision yourself, not disclosing what they have said, but you need to create that space for yourself where you can also get immediately when you feel like you are, taking it on board.
Okay, so for all listeners, let us all listen very carefully to what Joyce is saying. You too need to be able to offload. So when people offload you, you need to have your own circle where you can offload as well, so that you are also making sure that you're being taken care of. Is that right, Joyce?
Yes, yeah. You have to express your feelings, how you feel about that information. And just talking to somebody yourself as well helps you to get through and go into the next place. So you need to talk to someone to feel better. Yeah.
Okay. I think Michael in the chat just stated it, hit the nail on the head, where he said debriefing sessions. And I think this is where COVID has denied a lot of us that opportunity, because that was happening before in a systematic way, but because we're all being traumatized on a daily basis, some people don't seem to have access to debriefing sessions. So please reach out to debriefing sessions. I'm going to ask a very technical question. This one's for Lorraine. I'm moving on. What causes mania? Somebody wants to know what causes mania.
So many different things can. It can be a symptom of bipolar, where you go high. Sometimes it's just being stimulated. So you may have taken something in that then stimulates you, that makes you respond that way. So it's really hard to pinpoint one specific thing that can cause it, but it can be a symptom of an actual illness, and some of it we're predisposed to them genetically as well, and then other things in our lives that we're exposed to, either our experiences, or drugs and other things can exacerbate it and make it worse. And then that's when that's how we present. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the issue that you have, because it can be caused by drugs and other things as well. So that's why for you to be diagnosed with anything, it's better to have a doctor, because they look at many other things that are happening with you at that time to be able to categorically say that actually this is part of a disorder, or this is a response to some sort of external stimulation.
So it's all about going to root cause analysis, what's causing the mania, because we see what's being presented, but we need to understand what's causing it.
Yes. Yeah.
And one of the things with mental health, we're beginning to notice is that it's manifesting physically.
Yes.
I've got colleagues who are saying I've put on weight because of the comfort eating or because of the stress.
Yeah.
And
I
get high blood pressure. So instead of just dealing with the cause that we can see, we need to go back to the root analysis and say, what is it that's triggering? So there's about triggers. We need to find out what's causing us to behave, or what's causing us to manifest in this way. Can I just pass the floor to Clement? Clement, there was a question there from Isabel. Do you want to ask that question? Clement? Have I lost you? My co-host, do not desert me.
I'm not deserting you. I'm not deserting you. There's a question from Isabel?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, yes, there's a question from Isabel. She's asking, how can we make sure mental health of a child is promoted at household, community, and school level? I think our question is basing that it feels like the mental health of children is almost not talked about, or is almost neglected, and we focus much on adult mental health. So how can we promote mental health in childhood as well, in the community and in schools? That's the question for me, Isabel. I think.
Yes, go ahead, Lorraine. Yeah.
So that's a fantastic question as well. So there's something I think about that community response and thinking about the future. Firstly, charity begins at home. The majority of our life experiences are experiences within our homes in terms of our family and that interaction. But yes, sadly, there's also schools and other things. I think the best way to do is making sure that we, even us as mental health professionals, support the schools and the teachers in terms of little things that they can do at school, but also recognizing. We know one of the biggest things that impacts children, it's either, if it's not at home, it's bullying, and bullying at school from other children. But we also know that people who bully, it's usually a sign of something else that's going on with them. So it's that vicious cycle. And if that, if those situations are exposed to children from a very young age and it continues through their lives, it then becomes quite entrenched within them, that then has an impact on their decisions and the stuff that they do. But I think it's about us supporting families in relation to sometimes how to deal with some sort of challenging childhood behaviors. I mean, you know, I'm sure some people on the call have got children, and being a mom of one myself, they can be quite trying. But there's something about how, as parents, do we support our children at home, and then also how schools are equipped to support children and young people. The same way as adults, sometimes we need people to speak to, it's the same as children. And there could be other family members, it could be other people at school about some of the things that is worrying them. And we know school pressures, peer pressure, or things at home. Parents we sometimes think that we're hiding things from children, but children can sense and pick up when we're extremely worried. When parents fight physically, children see that has such a huge impact. Or when a parent is sick and they don't know what's going on, and sadly when a parent dies or a sibling dies, that has an impact. And sometimes you're so right, we can concentrate on the adults, but actually the the impact has already started at a young age. So it's multifaceted. There's so many different areas where we have to be alert to children who may be affected, whose mental health may be affected.
That's an extremely fantastic point, because like we're saying, COVID has affected all of us, and that includes children, with schools having to be closed, with the lockdown having to stay home. And some parents have never really sat down with their children for 2 months or a week constantly, and that's brought about stress with regards to relationships and how they communicate. So you know, we have to start thinking outside the box on and how we communicate with our children. I've got colleagues where I have become their children, their daughter's aunt that they can confide in, because culturally it's difficult for us to speak to our parents because we are not brought up that way. I know it's different for everyone, and it's easier to talk to somebody else. So as a parent, just think about who are the safe people that I can introduce my children to, that they can, if they can't come to me, I trust I can be their go-to person to give them the adequate advice that they need. So that is a really, I think it's another topic on its own, how to manage the pandemic for children. A quick question for Reverend Perin. Somebody wants to know, what affirmations do you use when you're in times of stress? So you were talking about affirmations, and people want to sort of understand, what sort of affirmations do you utilize during stressful times?
Is that from a personal perspective?
If you can answer from a personal perspective, and if you can answer from people from an outside perspective as well.
You know, it's kind of similar to the response I'd give for children. I'm a firm believer that we become a product of our environment. So how we behave in front of children, that's how they're going to behave. I also believe that who we have in our circle, if you want to call it a circle, that's how the people in our circle will generally going to behave. If you walk in doo-doo, poo-poo, you're going to start smelling like poo-poo. And that is reality. And I feel, for me, I think sometimes we could complicate things too much. But if we look from the perspective of just loving people, treating people right, as Joyce saying, the listening skills, the empathy and what have you, as Lorraine was saying, things around understanding trauma, educating ourselves, we're going to get to a better place by giving affirmation. And for me personally, it is about getting in the word and all the spiritual side, but also about spending time with my family and my children and my wife. And, you know, I love kissing before we go at the house and coming in, and probably they get a bit fed up with me sometimes. You know, one of my daughters plays cricket and I'm a lover of cricket, but I'm not fit enough to play anymore. So for me, that well-being aspect, that affirmation is about going to watch her play cricket, walking around the pitch, you know, some of the simple things I would say in life.
Okay. Whilst I still have you talking, I just wanted to touch on the topic around men's mental health. Now, COVID has changed the dynamics. I know that the dynamics are changing within the family anyways, but COVID has sort of changed the dynamics a lot when it comes to finances and how things are at home. And a lot of this is reflective on the numbers that we're seeing with regards to issues with mental health and suicide, especially for men within our own community here in the UK, as well as in Malawi. As a wife and as people who support our husbands and our men, what should we be looking out for? And how would you advise men who are currently experiencing what they don't understand as mental health issues, but just concerns? What triggers should they look out for, and when should they start reaching out? And as wives and those who support our men, what can we do to ensure that they're getting the appropriate support, or to pick up so that we don't turn around and say, oh my God, he was highly functional, I don't know how that happened? Okay,
so from a spouse perspective, I think Joyce mentioned listen to each other.
Uh-huh.
I think it's critical, it's crucial that we do listen to each other. And also, and I think sometimes it's hard in a marriage to be non-judgmental, but we've got to learn to be non-judgmental. We've got to think I'm learning every day, I'm trying my best every day to think, you know something, David, it's not about you. You know, it's about my wife. It's about her well-being. Some of the, you know, I think sometimes we're quick to argue, we're quick to fight, we're quick to conflict, generally in relationships. And I think it's about taking that step back and thinking first and foremost, what is best for my spouse? I mean, if I could give the ladies some advice, if you want to take my advice, that is, regarding your husbands, is, you know something, tell him, say you love him. Stroke his bald head if he's got a bald head, you know, love him up. And it's okay to put on a bit of makeup and a nice dress and wine and dine, and that's all okay. And I'd say very similar for the men, you know, something, do something special, you know. And I'm not going to say it in this format, but if it was a group of men, we could have some real talk about, you know, something. We could even spice up our marriages. And some people are thinking that he said spice up marriages. I don't just mean sex. There's other areas. Sorry to go there. Yeah, sorry to go there.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. We need you to go there. We want you to be as honest as you can be.
There's other areas in our relationships that we could spice up. And sometimes that comes through just speaking to each other.
Fantastic. Now we've got nurses on the panel. So there is a question around nurses and mental health. As we're all aware, at the beginning of the pandemic, there were our nurses from ethnic minority backgrounds. We lost a lot of our colleagues to COVID-19, and some of the experiences of our nurses on the front line were, well, in terms of always being put out on the front line, being put out in areas of high risk and so on. And to what I think Ethel alluded to earlier, that we are doing things because we're thinking, oh my goodness, I need to send money back home. I'm supporting 101 people and I'm supporting my own home. So we continue to put ourselves in areas of risk. What advice would you give to nurses in terms of managing their mental health and well-being? In 1 minute, if you're able to do that, each one of you, if you're I'm putting you on the spot here, and that's including you, Reverend Perin.
Oh, so I didn't get away with it.
So what advice would you give to nurses with regards to their mental health and well-being? So this is once again around the fact that because of our job roles, we have to be the strong ones. So we're constantly looking after people. We are experiencing trauma and seeing more deaths than we have ever seen before. And people expect us to be strong, and yet they forget that we're human beings. We are mothers, we are wives, we are fighting with the home officers. You know, there are so many things that are still going on in our lives on a day-to-day basis. But as a nurse, just by the fact of the name that you're a nurse, people expect you to have it all together. Mm-hmm. And we don't have it all together. I'm saying that now. I've had to access mental health support last year. And that was, some people find that to be shameful because we don't talk about that in our community. But I knew that, oh my God, I need time out. I need to breathe. And what Ethel said, take time to just build yourself up again when you know that things are not working well. So what advice would you give to nurses?
I think for me personally, it's been talking to colleagues at work, being open. You know, at the moment in management, they've put on systems where managers can speak, create time for their staff. And it's being open in those conversations when you're struggling. Let the management know what you're going through. That's quite crucial because sometimes, especially out of experience, you feel like nobody's been listening. But I think this pandemic has brought an awareness. It has brought certain skills that people did not have, and helping people to open up to one another. We've become closer. We may be apart, but we've become closer than before. So management is a good place, and the rest as well. You know, the world is still, even if you're not there, the world will still continue to function. So it's knowing your limits, knowing when to stop and take a break, like the other people have said.
Okay. I think maybe you might. I will let the others think about it because I will give you a chance to sort of put all your thoughts together in a final statement. But there was something that Reverend Perin touched on with regards to how we are mourning, and Lorraine as well, that COVID has affected how we mourn. And that's affecting us in terms of who we are as a people and as a culture. And there are different camps to how we do this. I know that there have been incidences like in Ireland where the police were called in because a group of Malawans were mourning, and we all gather into one house and we all want to cry together. And so how, as a reverend, with regards to how are you supporting people when it comes to mourning and grief, and how do you think we can do that effectively so that we're not losing touch of our community? Lorraine, this one I'm throwing out to you as well.
It's integral that we somebody mentioned about thinking outside of the box. My wife is a nurse and she's the best nurse in the world. She works extremely hard and also runs a healthcare recruitment agency. And one of our nurses, who I think some of you definitely know her, passed away last year. Where are we? April? Is it April? And one of the things, what we've been doing, because we've also lost quite a number of close family members, we bought a speaker box with a microphone, and we went to the houses, whether we stopped on the driveway or the pavement, bought some shopping, etc., dropped off the shopping, knocked the door, dropped off the shopping, and we just stood on the doorway, good social distance, sang some songs, said a few words of encouragement. Neighbours would come out. It was an opportunity also to witness to neighbours, but just to show people that we were still there. Obviously, we couldn't go in the houses, we couldn't hug, we couldn't cry with them like we normally do. But for me, the important thing was about doing something.
So it's doing something, even if it's a little something. That's important, so that people just know that you are there.
Yep, seriously, even if it's a £10 donation towards the funeral.
Yeah.
A bag of rice, because I don't eat sima, only when I go to the village.
Okay, Clement, do you have any questions? Clement? Well, whilst Clement is looking through his list, I just wanted to sort of read through a list that I've started to get in response to the challenge that Reverend Perin put out to the group about what do we do, what one thing do we do to sort of identify that as our own thing. So people have stated that they listen to music, they dance, they walk, they run, they cook, they host people, which is questionable. Well, as long as you're Zoom hosting, that's fine. I mean, we've had lots of Zoom birthday parties and things like that. Reading, sleeping, swimming, still questionable, but it shows that people are doing something, and we can learn from one another that it's not just about sitting in the house and staying in your bed, because that's not healthy for your mental health. You need to get up and about and do different things. Okay, Clement, back to you.
I think most of the questions have been tackled regarding the topic of the webinar.
Yeah, because I'm aware of the time and I know we've gone over. And for our panel, I just wanted to say a massive thank you. But before I let you go, anybody who's got questions, please continue to send them. We're going to send them out to the panel and they can answer them for you. So please prepare yourself, panel. I am giving you each a minute to just say your final thoughts about any further advice that you'd give our listeners with regards to how they can cope within this pandemic, because it's been a year. It's been a long year. Nobody has been immune from it. We have all been hit in one way or the other. And I think if they just could take one thing from you, please give us a minute of your time to just advise us before we shut down. I'll start with you, Reverend Perin, and then Joyce and Lorraine. I'll give you 2 minutes to think about what you have to say.
You know, I'm fine. I'm good to go.
Okay.
I would say, you know, find something to do for your own personal well-being, and it may be something from the list that you've just read. You know, I've actually, one jumped out for me as you were speaking, and maybe it's to host some platform, some hosting via platform.
Thank you, David. Joyce?
I think the one word is listen. As a professional, as a husband, as a wife, as a child, listen and pay attention. And also talk to someone. There may be some past history of betrayal, but there's still people out there that are ready to listen, that will not judge you, that will give you their presence. They may not say anything, but their presence will be enough to comfort you and to let you know that you are valued, you are respected, and it's okay not to feel okay. And for children, it's okay when they don't feel well. They need to be reassured. It's okay if they don't feel okay. So talk to someone and listen.
Okay, it's listening, it's okay not to be okay, and find one thing that you can do for yourself. Lorraine?
Oh my God. I think it's about acknowledging everything that we've all been through. You have to listen to your body and to your soul. If it's tired, you need to give it a rest. It's time to at least sometimes be selfish for the moment to protect yourself. Also use all the resources that you've got available to you. If your work has got staff call lines, if they've got support lines, if you've got supervision, use it. It's there for a reason. Often we are the people who don't go and seek for those things, and we think it's an absolute weakness. It's okay to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is one of it's one of the states of being a human being, and actually our vulnerability and knowing it prepares us for dealing with it and protecting ourselves as well. So there's no shame in that.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. I think all of you have just summed it up really, really well, that we have to check on our bro, look after ourselves. And the first step to healing is acknowledging that you recognize that there's a problem and that you need to heal. So recognize as a problem and then start taking the steps to ensure that you're okay. I just want to give the floor to Charity Gladstone, who is our president, so that she can just say a few words in a minute before we close. But from my part, I just wanted to say a massive, massive thank you. I feel like we've just scratched the tip of this conversation, and there needs to be more. And I think that's something moving forward as Muna, we need to do in a more focused manner in particular areas. So Charity, floor to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Sarah. Thank you so much, our guest speakers, Reverend Perin, Joyce Mbwana, Lorraine Sunduza. We have really adopted you, whether you want us Malawians to go and give cows to Zimbabwe to get you back, we will do it. We'll do everything that we can do to get you back. Thank you so much. This is such a needed session for our community. We have experienced a lot of loss. As Reverend Perin said, we lost our Malawian colleague last year, not only one, but two nurses to COVID. And that's a lot considering the number of nurses that are here. Some of our colleagues, they've been long-term, and some have lost their long-term sick and they've lost their jobs. They are suffering some economic consequences due to that. We haven't grieved in a way that we grieved before. As you've said, in Malawi, we scream, we let it out. It hasn't been the same this year. And not only that, sadly, we're hearing a lot of young men, Malawians, committing suicide. So
You nailed it there. Check your bra, check your bro, and also check your sis, isn't it? And it's okay not to be okay, as Tidziwe has put it in the chat. So we are worthy, and the historical sufferings that we have experienced as ethnic minority also superimposes all the vulnerabilities that we have and the things that we go through. So it's just good to connect, to network, and to reach out when we are not seeing each other. It's good to talk. And there's some very difficult questions which I have been told, or probably in my job, in my role, to ask about suicide. And I tell you, at first, that was a very difficult question for me to ask, that do you feel suicidal? I just felt like I was offending somebody. We don't talk about that in Malawi. It's not culturally acceptable. But yes, it's okay to ask those questions, because you never know what you get. You never know. So thank you so much. We will be holding this as a series, and I'm sure we will welcome you back. I'm hoping you come back to be with us, Lorraine and Reverend Perin. Joyce is ours, so she doesn't have any choice. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Just to say, I know we've had a really heavy topic, and if anything that we have discussed today has affected anybody in any way, we have put up a link with regards to resources for support. Feel free to contact any of us, contact info@Mbwana for further support. And I know that there's psychological support from Malawi as well. Charity is going to put that up so that people in Malawi can access mental health support as needed. But as Mbwana, we are here. And once again, from myself, Clement, and the whole Mbwana crew, thank you all so much, and thank you for your time and for staying with us to Friday. So I do appreciate it that you've all got things to do. And I would like to release you all, but we are going to stay open for another 10-15 minutes if people want to stay and chat. But officially, we have closed the session. So thank you very much. And God bless you and have a blessed night.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself, yeah? Check your bro, check your sister. I love that saying. I'm going to steal that, Reverend Perin. It'll be all over my Twitter like it's my own, but I will put your name next to it so that I'm not claiming it as my own.
Okay, it's all good. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorraine and Reverend Perin, it's a pleasure meeting you, because I haven't met you before. So I hope our paths will cross again soon.
No,